And the kind of guys I ran with, they could relate to that. Oh, what? Holy, what you talking about? I gotta go someplace. So I was having a hard time because I was really excited about God, and I really wanted to be pleasing to God, and I really wanted to do everything right. But there was also still this hole in my heart for natural affection and attention. And so I went back and forth, and I missionary dated for a while. You know, that is, I was just going to save that man myself for Jesus. Anybody here? And that didn't work out very well, because I realized after a while that God wasn't going to allow any relationship to work in my life that he hadn't ordained for my life. Because I had been crazy enough to pray a very interesting prayer, a dangerous prayer in fact, because I had read the scripture in the word that said in Psalms, he gave them the desires of their heart, and it brought leanness to their souls. That scripture scared me. Because I said, I never want to have leanness of my soul at the expense of just something that I thought I wanted that I didn't know wasn't good for me. So I said, God, I haven't had the best of taste in life. And so I'm going to give you permission that no matter how much I beg, scream, holler, pray, kick, or scream for something, please do not give it to me if you know that it will take me out of your will or if it will be detrimental to my life and my joy level. That's a dangerous prayer. But it's the best prayer that you can ever pray in your life. It will save you from many things. And so, every time my relationship didn't work out, and I'd go, God, he said, but didn't you tell me? Did you give me permission? Oh, okay. So, no, Michelle, no. And, oh, okay. So we went back and forth and up and down that way for a while. And then one day I just have you ever just like gotten sick and tired of being sick and tired? I got to that place and I just said, God, you know what? I don't want you to give me a husband until you can prove to me that I can be happy with just you. Because if you can't prove that to me, then I'm going to have to quit this Christian thing, because it would be very hypocritical for me to tell people that you're all they need if I'm not convinced of that myself. And can I tell you, from that moment, my life changed drastically. It was like God stepped in to fulfilling that and showing me different facets of himself as my friend, as my brother, as the lover of my soul, as my confidant, as the one who began to fill up spaces and places in my heart that no one else had been able to do. And I discovered that the void in our hearts is not a person-sized hole. There's a God-sized hole and a purpose-sized hole. And when those two are filled, let me tell you what happens. Desperation leaves your life. Neediness leaves your life. The need for affirmation and validation leaves your life. And you become so much more discerning when someone approaches you. You are able to get to the bottom line right away and know if that person is going to add or subtract from what God has already done and is doing in your life. And that is critical. That is when you no longer have hungry dog syndrome, as I called it. There'd be times when I would not have any man in my life for a while, and then someone interesting would show up, and I wouldn't ask God first. I wouldn't check in with him. I wouldn't ask friends. I wouldn't check anywhere, because by then I was so hungry. Hey, what do dogs do if you put a bone in front of them? Do they sniff it to see if there's poison on it? No, they just go for it, right? And so I found myself a lot of times jumping into relationships and halfway through, finally feeling the tap of God on my shoulder. That's not good for you. And it would start all over again. So I noticed that when he became my center, and being in purpose became the wheel outside of that wheel, that it slowed my role immensely. And I then took a longer time to examine people who approached me and discern if I allowed them in or out. Because after all, what? The Bible tells us to guard our hearts with all diligence, right? Because why? It's a matter of life and death. You know, and we might not experience physical death, But we can die by degrees through relationships that hurt us and bruise us and wound us. I think that, I always like to talk about the woman at the well. 6 times around, Jesus was the 7th man. By then she was so jaded and so hurt and so used to being disappointed that that's what she lived to expect. Some of us are here today, and we've had cycles like that in our own lives, and we've wondered, how and when will this cycle break? Why is it always the same cycle of disappointment, of repeat? I always used to tease and laugh and say, I dated the same man in different sizes, shapes, and colors. Names changed, behavior remained the same. And after a while, I realized that that was no longer attractive to me because my eye was set someplace else. He says he will guide us with his eye. But that requires that we look into his eyes. If I'm looking into your eyes and you do this, I'm going to look to see where you're looking. You see? And so God is saying, look deeply into my eyes and only look where I look. That's why Jesus was able to say, why are you asking about the Father? If you see me, you've seen him. I only say what he says, I only do what he says, because he was constantly looking into the eyes of the Father and reflecting what he saw there. And that's our goal as women of God, to look into the Father's eyes and reflect what we see there, to only look in the direction that he points to. And when we do that, it keeps us in a safe place. It preserves our hearts. It preserves our joy level. He promises us a joy that the world cannot take away. So why do we allow people to take our joy? Because we confuse joy with happiness. Happiness is external. It shifts by degrees based on what comes in and out of our lives and the temperature of the day. But joy is something that God has promised to place inside us for us to draw on. And those rivers of living water continually rise up to refresh us, renew us, revive us, because we see the source of love. We see the source of fulfillment as something that happens within and not without. So I wanted to put some things in perspective for you. Where do we get that longing from? Because I think sometimes we fight the feeling and think that that's supposed to help us be holy and get over it. And, I'm going to convince myself, by telepathy, that I don't need a man, don't want a relationship, And some of us have settled it. I know everyone in the room is not in that space, but I just want to start from the beginning and just kind of graduate, and then we'll open the floor for discussion, because this is really more about you than about my thoughts. I'm at this point sharing the journey that God took me on to settle my heart, okay? But we know that started in Genesis. God placed the longing for companionship in our DNA. So it's not something that you're supposed to fight, but you must file it in the right place. Just as he says, be angry. Go ahead, get mad. But what are you going to do with the anger? Be angry and sin not. So my question to you tonight is, do you have a need, or does the need have you? If the need owns you, then it's draining you, it is frustrating you, it is disappointing you, it is keeping you on a perpetual cycle of disappointment that keeps you frustrated with God. And after a while, God fails to be trustworthy in your mind because he's not fulfilling your longings. But that's the lie of the enemy, because he's gotten your eye in the wrong place. Amen? So let us accept the fact that there is an inbred need in our DNA for companionship. Settle